Welcome back, and now for the news in detail. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has urged India to comply with the 2003 ceasefire agreement with Pakistan. Speaking along with Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi in Islamabad, Guterres said the United Nations can help restore peace between the two countries. Earlier, at the Sustainable Development and Climate Change Conference, he said human rights in occupied Kashmir must be respected. Our correspondent Sumaira Khan has more details in this report.
United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres is in Pakistan on a 4-day visit to attend an international conference on Afghan refugees on February 17th. Speaking in Islamabad, Guterres cited the UN Human Rights Council's reports to stress on the situation in occupied Kashmir.
By the way, if there has been any solid contribution for that, are the two reports that were presented by the Human Rights High Commissioner on the situation that I believe have had a very important role in clarifying the situation. So our strong commitment is clear. Human rights must be respected everywhere in the world, but also there.
Guterres added Pakistan is on the front lines of climate change. He urged world leaders to act on the issue before it is too late.
In the past decade, Pakistan has lost some 10,000 lives to climate-related disasters, including 1,200 who died due to a terrible heat wave in Karachi in 2015. And currently the country is enduring the risk of a locust emergency triggered by climate disruption. Global warming is leading to global swarming.
At the conference, Pakistan's climate officials said the country has taken concrete measures to address environmental challenges.
Melting glaciers, landslides, rising sea levels, heat waves in summers, and above all, smoke in winters. These impacts have serious consequences on people's health, efforts at poverty eradication, and collectively on the country's economy.
The UN chief also lauded Pakistan for embracing the Sustainable Development Goals since 2016. Pakistan is one of the first nations to integrate the SDPs into its national agenda and recognizes them as its national goals.
In a related development, the UN High Commissioner for Refugees has lauded Islamabad's willingness to host those displaced by fighting in Afghanistan. Pakistan is one of the largest refugee hosting nations in the world. It's home to millions of registered and undocumented people who have fled recent decades' wars in Afghanistan. UNHCR Regional Director for Asia, Indrika Ratwate, spoke of the current situation of refugees in Pakistan.
I think the main challenge right now is to really continue to provide support to Pakistan in hosting them and the host communities, and also give access really to skills and education for the young Afghan population here. I think if there is a comprehensive peace negotiation which really brings about sustainable peace, which all the key stakeholders are striving to achieve in Afghanistan, many Afghan refugees will want to return home.
Pakistan is convening a 2-day international conference to mark the 40 years of hosting Afghan refugees. The new Partnership for Solidarity conference will kick off tomorrow in Islamabad in collaboration with the UNHCR. More in this report by our correspondent Manahil Ahmed.
The son of Afghans who fled the war in their country and took shelter in Pakistan. Shawali was born in a refugee camp near Islamabad. This small settlement just outside the city houses about 5,000 Afghan refugees. Wali says he will not leave Pakistan, even if he is given an option to return to what many would call his home country.
I work in a close-by vegetable market. I have no wish to go to Afghanistan as I was born here. We thank Pakistan for allowing us to live here. I have Pakistani friends here, and if asked to go back to Afghanistan, then I have offered my friends to go there with me.
Wali is not alone. Pakistan's hospitality has won over many like him who now call this country their home.
My mother and father came here. I have never been to Afghanistan. All I know is that there is war in Afghanistan, but here we live in peace. I cannot go to Afghanistan.
Experts say the influx of Afghan refugees to a struggling economy like Pakistan has always had socio-economic repercussions. Pakistan's generosity has not been fully acknowledged by the international community.
The issue of Afghan refugees in Pakistan has been like a festering wound. With the arrival of the refugees, particularly in the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa and Balochistan province, we saw a rise in crime, social crimes. We saw a rise in the drug trafficking.
On her visit to Pakistan last year, former UNGA President Maria Fernanda Espinosa called for compensating Islamabad for housing millions of Afghan refugees. But the pledge has yet not been translated into action. As the peace talks between Taliban and the US finally seem to be making a headway, and the holding of International Refugee Conference in Islamabad, there are hopes for a voluntary, dignified and sustainable repatriation of these refugees to Afghanistan. Reporting for Indus News, Isa Naqvi, Islamabad.
Of course, our correspondent Isa Naqvi was reporting regarding the situation of Afghan refugees in Pakistan. Now, moving on, Pakistan has been one of the longest serving and largest contributors to the UN peacekeeping missions for the last 66 years. Throughout the decades, Pakistani missions have served across the world, including Africa, Central Europe and Central Asia. More in this report.
Pakistan deployed its first ever contingent in Congo in 1960, where it provided logistical support to UN troops. The country has since participated in 41 peacekeeping missions in 23 countries, with over 150,000 peacekeepers. During these missions, a total of 137 Pakistani peacekeepers have embraced martyrdom. Pakistan is one of the largest troop contributors, with over 8,000 peacekeepers, constituting over 9% of the UN's total deployment. Earlier this month, Pakistan's first female engagement team was awarded the UN Medal for its services in Congo. The 15-member team, including psychologists, logistic officers, and nurses, were awarded in South Kivu.
In India, Anti Citizenship Act protesters in Delhi's Shaheen Bagh are marching on Union Home Minister Amit Shah's residence. The protesters said the step is being taken because Shah announced anyone who has a problem with the act can meet him. Meanwhile, the district administration in Moradabad has issued a notice of $140,000 to organizers of the protests. The notice said protests have led to the extra deployment of police, increasing the expenses of the security forces. The Modi government has been facing protests and demonstrations for the last 3 months, in which 27 people have been killed. Iran's President Hassan Rouhani says Tehran will never hold talks with the US under pressure. In a televised address, Rouhani said Washington's policy of maximum pressure on Tehran won't work. He said peace and stability in the Middle East isn't possible without Iran's help. He also said Friday's parliamentary elections will be free and fair. A total of 7,148 candidates, including dozens of Iranians from the religious minorities, are running for 290-seat parliament. Moving on to Iraq, where the multiple rockets have hit a US-led coalition military base in Baghdad today. The US military official said the assault sent warning sirens blaring across the green zone. There have been no reports of casualties or significant damage so far. The attack comes just hours after one of Iran-backed groups of the Hashd al-Shabi military network announced a countdown to oust US forces from Iraq. In a tweet, the group posted a picture of an American military vehicle saying they are closer to the US base than expected. No one has claimed the responsibility for the attack yet. Since October, it is the 19th attack to the target, either the embassy or the US troops in Iraq. UN Deputy Envoy to Libya Stephanie Williams says countries are violating the arms embargo in Libya as if it's a joke. Speaking in Munich, the UN official said those who breach the embargo must be held accountable. The UN envoy called for an end to foreign intervention in the war-torn country. Williams said it is the Libyan people who will continue to suffer if the embargo isn't enforced. The UN envoy said there are violations by land, sea and air that should be monitored. She said the influx of advanced weaponry in Libya is very dangerous for the regional peace and security.
That are, happening on land, sea, and air, and that all needs to be monitored, and there needs to be accountability, ultimately. Libya is awash in weaponry, and now advanced weaponry, and that's very dangerous for regional peace.
Russia says it will continue searching for ways to resolve crises in the Middle East, North Africa and the Persian Gulf. Speaking at the Munich Security Conference, Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said Moscow wants to stabilize the global situation. Lavrov said Russia intends to promote a balanced approach for a fair resolution of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. He said Russia will stand for the unacceptability of substituting legally binding decisions on Iran's nuclear program by illegitimate unilateral actions. Speaking about the Syrian conflict, Lavrov said Russia and Turkey have a very good relationship, but it doesn't mean that they agree on every issue. The foreign minister said converting the Middle East into a theater of the geopolitical competition and using terrorists for the attainment of the goals is unacceptable. Turkey's security forces have arrested 450 people for their alleged links to the PKK terror group. The Interior Ministry said police detained the suspects over the last 5 days in anti-terror operations across 37 provinces. During the operations, police seized documents and weapons, including a large number of long-barreled firearms, a shotgun and a shotgun shell. The PKK is listed as a terrorist organization by Turkey, the US and the EU. The group has been responsible for the deaths of 40,000 people. In Palestine, Israeli warplanes have carried out multiple airstrikes in the Gaza Strip. In a statement, the Israeli army said its fighter jets and helicopters targeted Hamas installations after 2 rockets were fired from Gaza. No casualties have been reported yet. Tensions between Israel and Palestine have been rising since US President Donald Trump presented his Middle East peace plan. Trump's plan gives Israel a green light to annex key parts of the occupied West Bank. EU's top diplomat says the governments of the bloc must be willing to intervene in international crises. Speaking at the Munich Security Conference, Joseph Borrell said Europe has to develop an appetite for power. He said the EU should be able to act instead of only making comments and expressing concern. The EU is the world's largest trading bloc, but often fails to speak with one voice on the foreign policy. The governments of the bloc are divided on several international issues like Libya and Venezuela. Regarding differences, Borrell said when there is no unanimity in the EU, the remaining majority have to act. With new leadership in Brussels, the EU has launched into a flurry of diplomacy since January, particularly on the Middle East. In China, 142 people have died in the last 24 hours due to the new coronavirus outbreak, bringing the death toll to 1,665. The National Health Commission says over 2,000 have been confirmed infected, increasing the total number of cases to 68,500. Meanwhile, Taiwan has reported its first death from the disease. More in this report.
With hundreds of deaths by the novel coronavirus every day, China claims the number of new cases has dropped for the 3rd consecutive day. Chinese health officials say the drop shows that the epidemic is controllable overall.
There are 2,641 newly diagnosed cases of the virus, 849 newly diagnosed acute cases, and 143 new cases of deaths from the virus, of which 139 are in Hubei, 2 cases in Henan, and 1 case each in Beijing and Chongqing.
The World Health Organization says the global community should join efforts to develop a vaccine for the new coronavirus. The global health body said it will also financially help develop medicine and make it accessible for everyone.
We need to make diagnostics, we need to make vaccines, we need to make treatments, and we also need to communicate more effectively with our populations as to how they can protect themselves. And we've seen that in communities in China and Singapore. We need to empower our communities.
Tens of millions of people in China are still facing heavy restrictions on their day-to-day activities as part of the government's efforts to halt the spread of the virus.
It's time for a short break. We'll be right back. Welcome back. French President Emmanuel Macron says Europe is about to become a continent that doesn't believe in its future. Speaking at the Munich conference, Macron said European countries have to accept disagreements and cannot be a junior partner to the US. Macron said Europe needs to strengthen its defense for greater sovereignty. But he said greater European military cooperation was not a project against NATO. He said common security in the EU has two pillars, NATO and a Europe of defense. Macron said Europe requires the ability to act independently and produce its own policy.
If we have no freedom to act, then we have no credibility in foreign policy. And we can't be a junior partner to the United States of America, because sometimes we have disagreements that we have to accept. On Iran, we have disagreements. If we haven't found all financial and economic and military sovereignty, then we can't have a proper foreign policy.
Britain says its post-Brexit rules will turn off the tap of foreign low-skilled workers. Interior Minister Priti Patel said all the skilled workers will need to earn enough points to work within the UK. Patel said foreign workers will need to speak English, have a firm job offer and meet the salary requirements to enter the country. At the moment, EU citizens are able to move freely between the member states. The Brexit campaign was fought over immigration rules in a bid to bring down the number of people arriving in the country. This year, London and Brussels will negotiate the terms of the post-Brexit deal, which will come into force in 2021. Storm Denise is continuing to lash large parts of the United Kingdom, bringing heavy rain and strong winds. The UK has deployed the army to help with flood relief, build barriers and repair defences. Storm Denise hit barely a week after Storm Ciara caused disruption to transport, flooded homes and left thousands without electricity. Severe weather warnings are in place for much of the country. The Ministry of Defence says 75 soldiers from the Royal Regiment of Scotland have been sent to Ilkley and Calderdale in West Yorkshire. Meanwhile, heavy rain has been falling across southern Scotland, leading to 3 severe flood warnings for the Huawei area in the Scottish borders. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has arrived in Senegal as part of his African tour, which will also take him to Angola and Ethiopia. He was greeted by the Senegalese Foreign Minister Amadou Ba at the airport. Pompeo will attend the signing ceremony of the 5 agreements with Senegalese officials later. He will also meet with the Senegalese President Macky Sall. Pompeo will discuss $106 million in security assistance that Washington has pledged since 2014. His visit is seen as part of the efforts to deepen cooperation between Dakar and Washington. The visit comes 3 weeks after France warned the U.S. against possible American troop cuts in West Africa. In Sudan, former President Omar al-Bashir is facing new charges of corruption, money laundering and funding terrorism. In a statement, Sudan's Attorney General Said al-Bashir gave testimony in a terror financing probe. He said some government officials were involved in financing the Muslim Brotherhood organization and other international terrorists. The former president was also questioned about suspected illegal money regarding selling the telecom companies to foreign investors. Al-Bashir was ousted by the military in April last year after mass protests against his rule. South Sudan rebels have rejected a government peace offer to return to a system of 10 states. The statement has dashed hopes of ending a 6-year war that has left at least 380,000 dead in the country. President Salva Kiir said he will compromise by cutting the 32 present regional states down to original 10, which was a key rebel demand. But he also included 3 administrative areas of Pibor, Ruweng and Abai on the top of the 10. Rebel chief Riek Machar objected to those 3 areas, saying it cannot be referred to as reverting to the original system. He said they call upon President Kiir to reconsider this idea of creating administrative areas. Machar warned the 3 areas risk causing further problems, calling the issue a Pandora's box. In Nigeria, 30 people have been killed in attacks in 2 villages in the northwestern state of Katsina. Police said armed bandits burned 21 people to death, while 9 villagers were shot dead in Dankar and Sowa. Police said motorbike riding assailants made off with food and livestock after the attack. It said investigative teams have been deployed to the villages. Hundreds of people have been killed in northwestern Nigeria in robberies and kidnapping since last year. The death toll continues to rise as the African country struggles to contain militancy and gang wars. In Burundi, authorities have found over 60,000 dead bodies in 6 mass graves in Karusi province. Burundi's Truth and Reconciliation Commission said thousands of bullets along with the human remains from the graves were recovered. The commission chairman said clothes and glasses were used to identify some of the victims. In the country's 12-year-long civil war between Tutsi and Hutu ethnic groups, 300,000 people were killed by 2005. The state-run commission was set up in 2014 to investigate atrocities since the country's colonization in 1885 to the 2008 peace deal. The commission has mapped over 4,000 mass graves across the country and identified more than 142,000 victims who suffered violent deaths. North Koreans pay tribute to the former leader Kim Jong Il in Pyongyang, marking his 78th birthday anniversary. He was the father of the current North Korean leader Kim Jong Un. North Korean citizens and soldiers walked in heavy snow towards the Mansu-Hill monument. They laid baskets of flowers at the statues commemorating Kim Jong Il and his father, the founder of North Korea, Kim Il-sung. The late leader's birthday, 16th February, is a national holiday celebrated as the Day of the Shining Star. Facebook says online harmful content should be regulated by using telecoms and media industry's existing rules. Speaking at the Munich Security Conference, CEO Mark Zuckerberg said Facebook has improved its countering of online election interference. Zuckerberg said his company employs 35,000 people to review online content and implement security measures. He said Facebook's automated technology suspends over 1 million fake accounts each day, and the vast majority is detected within minutes of signing up.
I think that there needs to be regulation in at least 4 areas touching our company. And they are elections and political discourse around content more broadly, content moderation, privacy and data portability.
In Costa Rica, police confiscate 5.8 tons of cocaine in the country's biggest ever drug bust. Officials say the seized narcotics were about to be shipped to the Netherlands. One suspect, a 46-year-old driver, has been arrested in connection with the bust. The cocaine was found hidden in over 200 briefcases in a container of ornamental plants. The property on which the drugs were found belongs to the Dutch company APM Terminals. Central America has been a transit route for cocaine trafficked to Europe and north from the Andes into the US for years. In India, stand-up comedy is becoming an increasingly prominent art form. But those comics not towing the ruling BJP's narrative are being subjected to censorship and intimidation. More in this report.
Satire is a part of the political narrative in most modern democracies. But this can't be said for India, where anti-government comedians are facing a two-pronged attack of censorship and state intimidation. However, Kunal Kamra, a prominent anti-BJP comic, says this doesn't bother him.
Censorship will only improve me. It will make me sharper, it will make me wittier. I know all the laws, I skirt around it, and I say what I have to say.
Kamra was recently banned from a number of private airlines after heckling a prominent pro-BJP TV anchor during a flight. The move has been condemned widely as an excessive use of state power. Despite all that, Kamra managed to find his way to Singapore, where the Indian diaspora is eagerly buying tickets to his show.
It's a lot about Modi, it's a lot about the political situation in India. So he weaves it in very well in jokes and the messages comes out. So it's not for everyone, absolutely not for the Modi supporters, but I think people who are very much balanced and who are aware of what's going on in India. So they would love his shows.
New Delhi is struggling to put a lid on mass unrest since it introduced the widely unpopular Citizenship Amendment law, which has been condemned as anti-Muslim. Time and again, the BJP government and its supporters have resorted to high-handed tactics against protesters. This includes numerous shootings at demonstrations as well as violent threats.
More stories to follow right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Dubai has become home to the world's largest 3D printed building ever constructed. The structure took only 3 workers and a printer to be built. More in this report.
Dubai is known as a city of opulence that constantly tries to outdo other tourist destinations. After Burj Khalifa, the world's tallest building, the city has now become the site of a new architectural feat, the largest 3D printed building in the world, with walls 31 feet high and 2 stories spanning 6,900 square feet.
We in Dubai municipality have started researching on 3D printing. We have done a very long research, came up with a beautiful building with a 2-story. It has been registered by the Guinness Records book as the first.
US company Apis Core built the structure using only one 3D printer, which was moved around the site by a crane. Using 3D printing instead of traditional labor, the production cost of the project was reduced from over $680,000 to around $270,000.
The city has changed quite a lot over the last 5-10 years, and there's a lot more requirement for affordable units. So if you're able to have an industry which is able to produce units at a cheaper rate because the costs are lower, because there's such a significantly lower requirement for labor within those, that means the end product is likely to be a lot cheaper as well.
The government says the building is a move towards sustainability, using local materials and efficient insulation to reduce energy consumption.
U.S. White House advisor Ivanka Trump has praised women's economic participation in the United Arab Emirates. She said this during a keynote address at the Global Women's Forum in Dubai. She thanked Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid, the ruler of Dubai, for his commitment on this matter. Ivanka began her trip to the UAE in Abu Dhabi, where she visited the Sheikh Zayed Grand Mosque.
I want your success stories to be the future of millions of women across the region. This is the vision that brings us here together today. The theme of this year's forum is the power of influence. We know that when women are free to succeed, families thrive, communities flourish, and nations are stronger.
U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi has warned Washington's European allies against Huawei. Speaking in Munich, Pelosi said accepting the Chinese domination over 5G through the company will be choosing autocracy over democracy. She said letting Huawei set up 5G infrastructure is like putting the state police in the pocket of every consumer. The U.S. House Speaker added nations cannot surrender telecom infrastructure to China for financial expediency. Pelosi said Republicans and Democrats in the U.S. agreed that Huawei poses a threat to democratic values.
There's a big price to pay in terms of national security, in terms of economy, and in terms of our values and our governance. And that's why we have bipartisan support for this position.
Libya's UN-recognized government says the country will face a catastrophic financial crisis due to the oil blockade by General Khalifa Haftar's forces. Libya's oil output has fallen sharply since 18th of January when the rival groups started a blockade of oil terminals and fields. Head of the Government of National Accord, Prime Minister Fayez al-Sarraj, said the losses from the oil shutdowns have exceeded $1.4 billion. He said the 2020 budget will face a deficit and will drop to its lowest levels. Sarraj said foreign backing for his rival Khalifa Haftar will only prolong the conflict in the country. State-run National Oil Corporation warned earlier that oil output will eventually fall to 72,000 barrels per day from about 1.2 million previously. Haftar's Libyan National Army and the al-Sarraj's GNA have been fighting since April last year for control of the capital Tripoli. Thailand has raised over $3 billion in 5G spectrum auctions. The mobile operator snapped up 48 licenses ahead of an expected commercial rollout later this year. Thailand's top 3 mobile operators, Advanced Info Service PCL, True Corporation PCL, and Total Access Communication, PCL, are all bidding for 5G licenses. The country's two state-run firms, CAT Telecom and TOT, were also bidding for the licenses. The telecom regulator did not announce the winners due to the format of bidding process. Pakistan says it has made substantial progress with Turkey on a free trade agreement last week during the Turkish president's visit. Pakistan's Secretary of Commerce, Ahmed Sukera, said a delegation from the textile sector will visit Turkey in March. Sukera said both the countries were in agreement to surmount the issue of being competitors in textiles by finding ways to collaborate. He said the delegation will seek ways of joining each other's value chains. The minister says strong political will is shown by both the leaderships to increase the current level of trade. Earlier, Prime Minister Imran Khan's advisor on commerce said the two countries will begin talks to finalize the FTA in April. On Friday, Turkey and Pakistan linked several memoranda of understanding aimed at boosting bilateral trade. Now the weather updates. And that's all for now. With the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus News.